Imagine, just for a second, that someone hands you, like, a blank check. But this isn't a check you can just take down to your nearest ATM.
Right. Definitely not.
No, this is a check for 10 to $20 billion. And with this staggering pile of capital, you are tasked with building a single massive piece of global infrastructure.
Just one project.
Just one. But here is the catch. Before you can actually, cash that check and break ground, you have to sit down in a boardroom, lock the doors, and mathematically prove to a table full of incredibly nervous, risk-averse bankers that your colossal bet won't bankrupt them.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you even begin to do that?
I mean, it is a terrifying prospect if you don't have the right framework, You're asking these people to fund a project that, well, it won't see a dime of return for years.
Yeah.
And you're trying to predict global energy markets over a span of decades, accounting for, like, thousands of volatile variables.
Which seems impossible. But you prove it using a ruthless economic model. So today we're doing a deep dive into a masterclass training module on LNG, that's Liquefied Natural Gas Investment Analysis. And we're going to show you exactly how mega projects are pressure tested. Our mission here is to walk you through the anatomy of a multi-billion-dollar financial model using a massive LNG liquefaction plant as our ultimate case study.
It makes for the perfect subject, honestly, because these facilities are they're among the most complex and capital-intensive energy assets on the planet.
Literally massive.
Exactly. We are talking about infrastructure that routinely blows past that $10 billion mark. It requires this perfect marriage of heavy engineering and, frankly, razor-sharp financial structuring.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we start throwing billions of dollars around that hypothetical boardroom, we need to quickly set the stage on what an LNG plant actually does.
Right.
You take raw natural gas, which normally takes up just an enormous amount of physical space, and you cool it down. And I don't mean like putting it in an industrial freezer. I mean chilling it to negative 162 degrees Celsius.
Which, by the way, requires an incredible feat of thermodynamics.
Yeah.
Because when you drop natural gas to that specific temperature, it shifts from a gas into a liquid. And the crucial part here, the whole reason we do this, is that its volume shrinks by about 600 times.
600 times.
Yeah.
That is just wild to me.
It fundamentally changes the economics of energy. I mean, you take something that traditionally could only be moved, slowly through a regional pipeline, and suddenly it's incredibly dense. You can pump that liquid into a specialized insulated ship and export it across oceans to entirely different continents.
It makes long-distance global trade of natural gas economically viable.
Exactly.
But the journey to actually getting that liquid gas onto a ship, it's a brutal financial gauntlet. To get there, you first have to survive the mega build.
Oh, the build phase. Yeah.
This is all about capital expenditure, or CAPEX. Because before you can sell a single drop of this incredibly dense LNG, you face a 3 to 5 year construction phase.
At least.
Yeah, that is half a decade of burning through money without a single dollar coming back in.
And the sheer scale of that cash burn, it's really difficult to overstate. The benchmark costs in our source material, they're measured in tons per annum, or TIPA, of production capacity.
Okay.
So for a greenfield project, which just means, you're building from scratch on an empty plot of land.
Right. No existing infrastructure.
Exactly. It costs between $600 and $1,200 US per TIPA.
Okay, so let's do the math on that. If you're building a relatively standard facility that produces, say, 10 million tons per annum, your base cost, just for the physical materials and labor, is easily $8 billion.
Easily.
Where does that cash even come from? I mean, even massive multinational energy corporations don't just have $8 billion in loose change sitting around for a single project.
They definitely don't. And honestly, even if they did, they wouldn't use it. Yeah, they use a structure called project finance. In this setup, the project is funded mostly by a massive syndicate of bank loans. It's typically like 60 to 70% debt, with the remaining 30 to 40% coming as equity from the corporate sponsors.
Okay.
But the critical distinction here is that this debt is secured only against the project's own physical assets and its future cash flows. It has a limited recourse to those parent companies.
Wait, meaning if the plant goes belly up, the banks can't just look at the parent company and say, hey, sell off your other assets to pay us back.
Right.
So the bank is taking a huge leap of faith on this specific plant.
That is the essence of limited recourse, yeah. The project has to stand on its own 2 feet. For the corporate sponsors, this isolates their risk.
Which makes sense.
Right, because they don't want an $8 billion anchor dragging down their entire global balance sheet if this one plant fails. But because the lenders are taking on that isolated risk, they are going to scrutinize the economic model mercilessly. They dictate the terms.
And reading through those terms in the source, one concept during the build phase absolutely blows my mind. Interest intrect. During construction, or IDC.
Ah, yes. IDC.
To me, this is like putting the construction of a sprawling mega mansion entirely on a high-interest credit card for 5 years.
Yeah.
But you can't rent it out, and you can't live in it to get any value back. You're just watching the interest pile up month after month.
That is a very, very accurate analogy because the EPC phase, that's engineering, procurement, and construction, the folks actually pouring the concrete and welding the pipes.
Right.
It takes years, and the interest on the debt you've already drawn down starts accruing immediately.
Just ticking away.
Exactly. You aren't making money yet, so that interest is actually capitalized. It gets added to the total cost of the project. That IDC compounds over 5 years, and it can add a staggering 5 to 15% to your total funded CAPEX.
Hold on. So on an $8 billion build, I could be adding over $1 billion in pure interest before I even flip the switch to turn the plant on.
Easily. $1 billion just in interest. Which is why the financial model has to meticulously optimize when you actually borrow the money. You want to spend your equity contributions first, front-loading the cash from the sponsors, and delay tapping into that bank debt for as long as humanly possible.
Just to keep that interest-bearing balance low.
Precisely.
But the banks aren't just worried about the construction interest, are they? Because the source details these massive working capital buffers they demand for day one of operations.
Oh, yeah. Lenders are inherently pessimistic. They will demand what's called a debt service reserve account, or DSRA, be fully funded before the plant even opens.
Okay.
They'll sit in that boardroom and say, we need 6 to 12 months of our upcoming loan payments sitting in an untouched escrow account just in case your first year of operations is a disaster.
Just locking away hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yep. Plus, you have to fund the initial inventory, spare parts, and operating buffers, which usually adds another 3 to 6% of your operating expenses right up front.
So you've somehow survived this 5-year gauntlet. You've managed the billions in debt, the compounding interest, the nervous bankers demanding escrow accounts. The steel is finally in the ground.
Best day of your life.
Right. You'd think the bleeding stops there. But actually, the moment you turn the plant on, you start fighting a completely different enemy. Physics.
Physics always wins.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The standard cash costs are straightforward enough, right?
Yeah, you have fixed OPEX paying the plant personnel, planned maintenance, insurance, which runs about $20 to $60 per ton of capacity.
Right.
And then you have variable OPEX like chemicals and water, which scales depending on how much gas you process.
But the cash is only half the story here.
Right.
Because the biggest, quote-unquote, costs of running this plant aren't paid in dollars. They are paid in gas. The source calls this fuel-own use.
Right, because liquefying natural gas is an incredibly energy-intensive process.
Yeah.
These aren't like the little compressor running your kitchen refrigerator.
No, these are monsters.
Massive industrial monsters driven by gas turbines. To get to negative 162 degrees, the plant actually has to consume 8 to 12% of the incoming raw natural gas just to power itself.
It's wild to think about. It's like paying a pizza delivery driver by letting them eat 2 slices of the pizza on the drive over.
That's exactly what it is.
The volumetric loss.
Yeah.
You don't write a check for it, but the product you have available to sell at the end of the day is fundamentally reduced.
And your geographic location dictates how many slices that plant eats.
Because of the ambient temperature.
Exactly. Thermodynamics tells us that higher ambient temperatures drastically reduce refrigeration efficiency. So if you build your plant in a hot tropical climate, say Qatar or Northern Australia,
Oh, wait.
your compressors have to work much harder. They burn more of your own product to reach that cryogenic temperature compared to a plant built in the freezing cold of, say, Alaska.
That makes total sense. But the physical losses don't stop at the compressors. You also have to deal with boil-off gas, or BOG.
Yes. Because even in state-of-the-art cryogenic storage tanks, LNG is never perfectly insulated.
It's the real world.
Right, the real world has heat. And that heat ingress causes a continuous evaporation of the liquid back into a gas. It's a tiny rate, typically 0.04 to 0.06% of the tank inventory per day.
But you stretch that over a year across massive, towering tanks, and it becomes a massive volume of lost product.
Because keeping tens of thousands of tons of liquid at negative 162 degrees is basically impossible to do perfectly.
So it literally evaporates.
It does. Now, you can capture that evaporated gas and reliquefy it, but that requires firing up more compressors, which, again, burns more energy and increases your optics.
Got it.
So the ultimate takeaway for your boardroom presentation is this. Your net LNG output, the actual volume you can put on a ship and sell to pay off your debt, is strictly your gross input minus these unavoidable physical and thermodynamic losses.
All right, so we've survived the build. We've accounted for the staff, the maintenance, the fact that the plant eats its own gas, and the fact that the product literally evaporates into thin air.
Right.
How does this multi-billion-dollar headache actually print money? We need to talk about revenue mechanics.
And the entire financial model hinges on your commercial structure here.
Yeah.
There are two primary ways an LNG plant makes money: tolling and merchant.
Let's start with tolling, because it seems the most straightforward. Under a tolling model, the plant owner just provides a service, right?
Exactly.
The gas supplier, the toller, owns the gas the entire time. They pipe it in, and they pay the plant owner a fixed fee, usually around $2.00 to $3.50 per MMB2 to process it.
Yeah.
And for context, an MMB2, a million British thermal units, is just the standard metric chunk of energy used for pricing gas. The plant owner never actually buys or sells the commodity itself.
Which means the plant owner takes on zero commodity price risk.
Zero.
The revenue profile is highly predictable, almost like an annuity. It operates like a regulated utility. Project finance lenders absolutely love the tolling model because that steady fixed processing fee makes debt repayment incredibly stable.
Even if global energy prices are crashing or booming.
That doesn't matter to them. They get their fee.
I have to push back on this, though. If I am an equity investor and I just spent 5 years of my life and billions of dollars building this engineering marvel, why would I settle for a flat, boring $3 processing fee? I want the upside. The merchant model seems like the only way to actually make real money.
Well, you're touching on the fundamental tension between the greedy equity investor and the paranoid bank lender.
Naturally.
In a merchant model, the plant owner acts as a trader. They buy their own raw gas, and then they sell the liquefied product on the global market.
Right.
So you bear the full commodity price risk, but as you said, you capture the massive upside through what's called the netback margin.
Okay, let's define that. How does the netback margin create a windfall?
Let's look at a real-world geographic arbitrage. Say your plant is in the U.S. Gulf Coast. You're buying raw gas at the U.S. benchmark price, the Henry Hub, which is famously cheap.
Right, lots of domestic gas.
Exactly. But you are putting that gas on a ship and selling it to Northeast Asia during a freezing winter, pricing it against their benchmark, the JKM or Japan-Korea marker.
And if a winter storm hits Asia, that JKM price goes to the moon.
It absolutely goes to the moon. A tolling plant just collects its safe $3 fee, but the merchant plant, they capture that entire spread between their dirt-cheap U.S. feed gas and the sky-high Asian selling price.
Wow.
It's the difference between a steady 10% return and a generational windfall. Of course, the flip side is if global prices crash, a merchant plant could be completely wiped out because their margins vanish.
So it's a pure infrastructure play versus a volatile commodity trading play.
Yes.
How do you pitch that volatile trading play to the banks without them just laughing you out of the room?
What's fascinating here is that you compromise. Modern mega projects rarely pick just one extreme. They use a hybrid approach.
Okay.
To keep the banks happy, they will lock in 70 to 80% of their total capacity under long-term 15 to 20-year sale and purchase agreements or SPAs.
And the source emphasizes that these SPAs rely heavily on take-or-pay clauses. I love this concept.
Powerful.
It's essentially like signing a 20-year lease on an expensive apartment. Whether you actually sleep in the bed or you spend the whole month traveling, you owe the landlord rent on the first of the month regardless.
That is the perfect way to look at it.
Yeah.
The buyer is contractually obligated to pay for that contracted amount of LNG, whether they send a ship to take delivery or not.
Wow.
That take-or-pay provision provides a rock-solid revenue floor. It guarantees a baseline cash flow that secures the multi-billion-dollar debt. But by intentionally leaving 20 to 30% of their capacity uncontracted, the plant owner retains the ability to sell on the volatile spot market and chase those massive profit spikes.
Okay, so we have our billion-dollar build costs, our thermodynamic losses, and our hybrid revenue structures.
Yep.
Now, all of this data gets fed into the ultimate financial scorecard. This is the math that dictates a strict go or no-go decision in that boardroom.
The moment of truth. And the cornerstone of this judgment is the WACC, the weighted average cost of capital.
Let's break that down.
Think of WACC as a blended required rate of return. You have two sources of money funding this plant, right? You have the bank debt, which is relatively cheap, usually charging 4 to 8% interest.
Kind of like a massive, very safe mortgage.
Exactly like a mortgage. But then you have the equity investors, and according to the source, they demand an internal rate of return, an IRR, of 12 to 20%. It's vastly more expensive money.
Why such a massive gap, though? Why do equity investors demand 20% when the banks are fine with, like, 6?
Because of where they stand in line if the ship sinks. The lenders get paid first no matter what. The equity investors take all the residual risk.
Oh, so they're holding the bag.
They are entirely holding the bag. If the project runs over budget or the spot market crashes, the equity investors are the ones absorbing that loss. They demand a much higher return, kind of like venture capital, to justify that extreme exposure.
Makes sense.
So, the WACC blends the cheap debt and expensive equity together, usually resulting in an overall hurdle rate of 8 to 12% for the project.
But while the equity investors are obsessing over scoring that 20% IRR, the lenders don't care about the upside at all, do they?
Not even a little bit.
They are obsessing over one single metric to ensure survival, the DSCR, the debt service coverage ratio.
Yes. The DSCR is the ultimate metric of financial safety. It is simply the cash flow available to pay the debt divided by the actual debt payment for that period. Banks will generally demand a minimum DSCR of 1.20x to 1.30x.
Let me make sure I'm translating that math correctly. A 1.28x ratio means that for every $1 of loan payment you owe the bank this month, the plant is generating $1.20 in actual cash flow.
Correct.
So you have a 20% buffer. Why that specific number?
Because lenders know that reality never perfectly matches the spreadsheet.
Obvious.
A storm delays a shipment, a massive compressor needs unexpected maintenance, or a buyer defaults. That 20 to 30% buffer is their sleep-at-night margin. It ensures that even if revenues dip or OPEX spikes, the bank still gets its dollar.
The trading module provides this fantastic hypothetical to show how this all sings when it works perfectly. It outlines a mid-scale LNG plant. It cost $2.4 billion to build, running on that merchant model.
Right, the Crater model.
If they can buy their feed gas at $3.50 per MMBtu and sell the LNG globally at a baseline of $12, the economics are just staggering.
They are deeply robust. In that scenario, the project generates an incredible 4.25 at DSCR.
3.25x.
Yes, they have over 4 times the cash they need to make their debt payments. The banks are ecstatic.
And for the equity investors who took the risk.
Their levered equity IRR, meaning their return after the effects of the debt are accounted for, hits around 18 to 22%. It's a massive home run. The project pays back its initial equity investment in just 8 to 10 years.
Wow. But that assumes a perfect world. $12 LNG isn't a guarantee, and infrastructure projects of this magnitude rarely get built perfectly on budget.
Very true.
What happens when things inevitably go wrong?
Well, we connect this to the bigger picture. This is where the true power of the model reveals itself, through sensitivity analysis. Because the model is fully integrated, a single negative change in an assumption triggers what financial analysts call the cascade effect.
Oh, I like the sound of that. Or, wait, I guess I don't if I'm the investor. Let's play out a disaster. Say we're in year 2 of that 5-year build, and our EPC, the engineering and construction folks, run into massive supply chain issues.
Happens all the time.
The steel is late, labor costs spike, we go 15% over budget. What happens?
That is the nightmare scenario, because this isn't just a 15% dent in your wallet. The model is integrated, meaning everything is connected. First, your total capital expenditure shoots up. But your equity investors usually have a hard cap on their contributions. They aren't writing another check.
Right. Which means I have to go back to the banks. I have to borrow more debt to cover that 15% gap.
Precisely. And borrowing more debt mid-construction triggers the next problem.
Oh, the interest during construction.
Yep.
If my loan principal just got way bigger, the construction's taking longer, that interest compounding on my mansion credit card is going to explode.
It multiplies rapidly, so your final fully funded cost to build the plant is now vastly higher than that initial 15% overrun suggested.
It's cascading.
Exactly. And it doesn't stop there, because eventually the plant does turn on. But now you have a bloated mountain of debt, which means your monthly loan payments are significantly higher than we projected in the boardroom.
Which directly attacks your debt service coverage ratio. That safe 1.20x buffer begins to shrink.
Yeah.
The lenders start getting incredibly nervous.
They hate seeing that buffer shrink.
And because so much more cash is being siphoned off just to service this bloated debt pile, There is less cash left over to distribute to the equity investors at the end of the year.
Exactly. The payback period stretches out, and that target 20% equity IRR plummets. Finally, your overall project net present value collapses because you are calculating your returns against a much higher initial investment base.
Wow. So one 15% overrun on steel and labor cascades into a total deterioration of the entire financial structure. It's just a vicious cycle.
It is, which is why the final output of these models is often visualized as a tornado chart.
Tornado chart.
Yeah, it ranks the risk variables by how violently they can impact the equity returns. The biggest risks create a wide bar at the top, and it tapers down to the smallest at the bottom, looking like a tornado.
And according to the source, the number one biggest risk variable sitting at the very top of that tornado chart is the LNG selling price.
No surprise there.
It's the most volatile input. A 20% swing in the global price can alter your equity returns by 4 to 7%.
Followed closely by those CAPEX overruns we just walked through. Then gas feedstock prices, plant utilization rates, and construction delays. The lesson of the model is clear. You can have the most thermodynamically efficient, state-of-the-art plant in the world.
But if you don't fiercely manage your capital costs and commercial pricing strategies,
The entire enterprise collapses under its own weight.
it's incredible to think about. You look at an aerial photograph of an LNG export terminal, and it's this vast, sprawling industrial behemoth. Miles of steel pipelines, towering cryogenic tanks, massive gas turbines.
It looks purely physical.
Right. But behind all of that physical reality, there's a perfectly mirrored digital ghost. An integrated mathematical spreadsheet that balances the multi-billion-dollar construction, the thermodynamic OPEX losses, the commercial revenue mechanics, and the razor-thin risk metrics of the debt service.
The physical plant and the financial model are completely inseparable. You just cannot build the former without proving the latter.
Think back to that blank check we gave you at the start of this. It makes you look at that $10 billion a little differently. You aren't just building a factory. You are engineering a 20-year financial instrument.
That's a great way to put it.
Which brings me to a final thought from the source text that I want to leave you with. We've talked extensively about how tight this model is, the stress tests, the compounding interest, the required take-or-pay debt service.
Right.
It is all rigorously structured around a 15 to 20-year timeline, mainly to satisfy the nervous banks until that senior debt is finally paid off. But these massive cryogenic facilities, they are built with heavy engineering to last.
Oh, yeah.
They often have an operating life of 25 to 30 years. So imagine reaching year 21.
Okay.
The billions in bank debt have been entirely paid off. The bank's expensive WACC essentially plummets out of the equation. From that day forward, those sprawling compressors and tanks are practically printing pure, unlevered cash flow, meaning there are no more debt payments draining the accounts. What does that kind of late-stage, debt-free economic freedom look like for the equity investors who actually held on through the cascade effects, the physical shrinkage, and the market crashes?
That's a fascinating question.
But that is a deep dive for another day.
If you're interested in the templates, please visit our shop. The link is in the description.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and see next time.